Hello, everybody, and welcome to our ninth episode of The Book, our weekly show in which we just read the Bible together and we just chill around to see what conversation arises from it. This week we're doing chapters 18 and 19 of Genesis, and it's a very interesting part. I mean, like any of them, and we see two very different scenes. Basically, in the first one, we're gonna see how Abraham intercedes for Sodom for the sake of the righteous living there, and then how Lot, his own nephew his family, got to get into a little bit of a ruckus, and out of it come the Amorites and the Moabites, which then will become enemies of the people of Israel later on in history. So we see why the evil enters into those lineages in Genesis here, and yeah. As usual, if you're watching this on YouTube, let us know in the comments what you think. And then if you're watching this live, just let us know in the chat what you think. It's a very dynamic show anyway, so it's like we just read this and we meditate on it, but at the end of the day, we're just all gathering around the world and sharing our thoughts and sharing our experiences and our way of seeing this, or seeing other things in life. If you haven't seen other episodes, you can check them out on the YouTube channel as well. And yeah, if you like the content, press the like button. If you feel like sharing it with other people so they can watch it as well, you please do so as well. And if you want to see more, just subscribe. If you turn on notifications, you'll know when the next video uploads. And thank you very much. All right, so let's get started. First, we're gonna read through it just straight, and then we'll reread it or revisit it. Also, the footnotes in this edition of the New American Bible are pretty nice. I like reading them. They give you a lot of insight about some of the words they're chosen, the historical and the cultural context and such. So yeah, we'll start exploring that in a second. So we get started with Genesis chapter 18, Abraham's visitors. The Lord appeared to Abraham by the oak of Mamre, as he sat in the entrance of his tent, while the day was growing hot. Looking up, he saw 3 men standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the entrance of the tent to greet them, and bowing to the ground, he said, "Sir, if it please you, do not go on past your servant. Let some water be brought, that you may bathe your feet, and then rest under the tree. Now that you have come to your servant, let me bring you a little food, that you may refresh yourselves, and afterward you may go on your way." "Very well," they replied, "do as you have said." Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quick, 3 measures of bran flour, knead it and make bread." He ran to the herd, picked out a tender, choice calf, and gave it to a servant who quickly prepared it. Then he got some curds and milk, as well as the calf that had been prepared, and set these before them, waiting on them under the tree while they ate. "Where's your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There in the tent," he replied. One of them said, "I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah will then have a son." Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, just behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years, and Sarah had stopped having her menstrual periods. So Sarah laughed to herself and said, "Now that I am worn out and my husband is old, am I still to have sexual pleasure?" But the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really bear a child, old as I am?' Is anything too marvelous for the Lord to do? At the appointed time, about this time next year, I will return to you, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah lied, saying, "I did not laugh," because she was afraid. But he said, "Yes, you did." With Abraham walking with them to see them on their way, the men set out from there and looked down towards Sodom. The Lord considered, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, now that he is to become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth are to find blessings in him? Indeed, I have singled him out, that he may direct his children and his household in the future to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord may put into effect for Abraham the promises he made about him." So the Lord said, The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sins so grave, that I must go down to see whether or not their actions are as bad as the cry against them that comes to me. I mean to find out. As the men turned and walked on toward Sodom, Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous people in the city. Would you really sweep away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people within it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you. Should not the judge of all the world do what is just? The Lord replied, If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Abraham spoke up again. See how I am presuming to speak to my Lord, though I am only dust and ashes. What if there are 5 less than 50 righteous people? Would you destroy the whole city because of those 5? I will not destroy it, he answered, if I find 45 there. But Abraham persisted, saying, What if only 40 are found there? He replied, I will refrain from doing it for the sake of the 40. Then he said, Do not let my Lord be angry if I go on. What if only 30 are found there? He replied, I will refrain from doing it if I can find 30 there. Abraham went on, Since I have thus presumed to speak to my Lord, what if there are no more than 20? I will not destroy it, he answered, for the sake of the 20. But he persisted, Please do not let my Lord be angry if I speak up this last time. What if 10 are found there? For the sake of 10, he replied, I will not destroy it. The Lord departed as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned home. The 2 angels reached Sodom in the evening. Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he got up to greet them, and bowing down with his face to the ground, he said, Please, my lords, come aside into your servant's house for the night and bathe your feet. You can get up early to continue your journey. But they replied, No, we will pass the night in the town square. He urged them so strongly, however, that they turned aside to his place and entered his house. He prepared a banquet for them, baking unleavened bread, and they dined. Before they went to bed, the townsmen of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house. They called to Lot and said to him, Where are the men who came to your house tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may have sexual relations with them. Lot went out to meet them at the entrance. When he had shut the door behind him, he said, I beg you, my brothers, do not do this wicked thing. I have 2 daughters who have never had sexual relations with men. Let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you please. But do not do anything to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. They replied, Stand back. This man, they said, came here as a resident alien, and now he dares to give orders. We will treat you worse than them. With that, they pressed hard against Lot, moving in closer to break down the door. But his guests put out their hands, pulled Lot inside with them, and closed the door. They struck the men at the entrance of the house, small and great, with such a blinding light that they were utterly unable to find the doorway. Then the guests said to Lot, Who else belongs to you here? Sons-in-law, your sons, your daughters, all who belong to you in the city, take them away from this place. We are about to destroy this place, for the outcry reaching the Lord against those here is so great that the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who had contracted marriage with his daughters. Come on, leave this place, he told them. The Lord is about to destroy the city. But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. As dawn was breaking, the angels urged Lot on, saying, Come on, take your wife with you and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away in the punishment of the city. When he hesitated, the man, because of the Lord's compassion for him, seized his hand and the hands of his wife and his 2 daughters, and led them to safety outside the city. As soon as they had brought them outside, they said, "Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere on the plain. Flee to the hills at once, or you will be swept away." "Oh no, my lords," Lot replied to them. "You have already shown favor to your servant, doing me the great kindness of saving my life. But I cannot flee to the hills, or the disaster will overtake and kill me. Look, this town ahead is near enough to escape to. It is only a small place. Let me flee there. Is it not a small place? To save my life." "Well then," he replied, "I grant you this favor too. I will not overthrow the town you have mentioned. Hurry, escape there. I cannot do anything until you arrive there." That is why the town is called Zoar. The sun had risen over the earth when Lot arrived in Zoar, and the Lord rained down sulfur upon Sodom and Gomorrah, fire from the Lord out of heaven. He overthrew those cities on the whole plain, together with the inhabitants of the cities and the produce of the soil. But Lot's wife looked back, and she was turned to a pillar of salt. The next morning Abraham hurried to the place where he had stood before the Lord. As he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and the whole region of the plain, he saw smoke over the land rising like the smoke from a kiln. When God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham and sent Lot away from the upheaval that occurred when God overthrew the cities where Lot had been living. Since Lot was afraid to stay in Zoar, he and his 2 daughters went up from Zoar and settled in the hill country, where he lived with his 2 daughters in a cave. The firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is getting old, and there is not a man in the land to have intercourse with, as is the custom everywhere. Come, let us ply our father with wine, and then lie with him, that we may ensure posterity by our father." So that night they plied their father with wine, and the firstborn went in and laid with their father. But he was not aware of her lying down or getting up. The next day the firstborn said to the younger, "Last night I lay with my father. Let us ply him with wine again tonight, and then you go in and lie with him, that we may ensure posterity by our father." So that night too they plied their father with wine, and then the younger one went in and lay with him, but he was not aware of her lying down or getting up. Thus the 2 daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The firstborn gave birth to a son whom she named Moab, saying, "My father." He is the ancestor of the Moabites of today. The younger one too gave birth to a son, and she named him Ammon, saying, "The son of my kin." He is the ancestor of the Ammonites of today. Well, that was a lot. We first have this part. Well, we have a couple of parts. Was the fact that, these 3 men, which I assume they're like angels, envoys of the Lord, they come and they meet Abraham. And they find him, and what is it? At the tree of. These are long chapters this time. At the tree of Mamre. And yeah, they tell him about the fact that he's gonna have a son. And they once again, I mean, I guess this time is Sarah who's kind of doubting the whole thing again. But I mean, Abraham has doubted it before, and Sarah as well. And it's over and over, as we see in the Bible in general, and I guess in Genesis. And it's interesting because when I recall the figure of Abraham, I often forget. I mean, I don't think of all these moments in which he fails the Lord, and it's just, I mean, in some sense, it gives me comfort in the idea that I fail the Lord so much, and I deviate from the path, and I do the wrong things, or I just become tired or lazy, and I don't do what I'm supposed to. But seeing that even, the father of our nation, the father of the sons of, the sons of God, in faith, you know what I'm saying? The one from the beginning, before before Christ actually just redeems us all in his body. Like even him, the beginning of it all, the one that God chose and singled out and from whom, everything came to be in terms of our nation. Even him failed so much. Him and his family and stuff. And he has a good heart and all, but it's like, yeah, regardless of that, like he's so fearful. I mean, I'm not even so, like I wouldn't be as fearful, even more, much more. But just that, the idea that like it's so hard to find a righteous man. Like it says in I don't know what psalm, like, there's not a righteous man left. And there really isn't. Like only Christ is righteous and his mother. The rest are just constantly, the chosen ones, David as well, we'll see later, King David. Like the best of the best. They still fail like tremendously. Noah and his sons and Abraham and his sons and his nephew Lot also we see. I mean, again, I feel like Lot in these stories that we saw it in the previous chapters, and he was like, he's just a very unfortunate guy. Like, unfortunate in the sense that he doesn't make the best decisions, but he doesn't seem to ever have some type of evil nature in him. But the fact that he settles first in around Sodom, and we saw that in previous chapters, it's like it almost seems like everything is just starts to seep in all that sin and all that filth, and then we see it too. Even like it translates to the fact that his daughters, sorry, are married to men of Sodom, and then those men of Sodom don't want to hear it when he tries to save them, right? And but yeah, there's still Lot is saved by in regards to Abraham for being a nephew of the chosen one, and it's just like even with that, it's just like it's just interesting how God continues to try in different ways and continue to mess it up because he's the negotiation that we see also between Abraham and God about the righteous people in Sodom. Like I figured also in great part, I mean, Abraham is kind of advocating for he knows his nephew's there. He knows his nephew's family is there. But in general, advocating just for those that will suffer without blame, right? But at the end of the day, it's almost like we can see it in Lot and his daughters, especially that evil. I mean, in Lot too, to be honest. I mean, we kind of it's just the same confused fear because it's what it makes him, want to give up his daughters for the sake of the visitors. Like instead of, you know, uh, I mean, he's just in a desperate situation. He's fearful and in trying to keep these men that are coming to the house. I mean, I don't know. I guess it shows the wickedness of Sodom in that sense too, that they want to be there to have relations with the men inside the house. It's just like it was a way to violate them. But instead of standing his ground, or I guess yeah, I don't know. Telling, I mean, if he knew, I guess he doesn't know that these are envoys of the Lord, but just in general, the thing that he decides to do is to offer up his daughters as a way to save these guests. And then it's the guests themselves, the envoys of the Lord that have to save the whole thing and get him out of that mess and what he was about to. I mean, not that the people were going to listen to him, actually, they were about to kill him before going into the house. But yeah, it's just the whole thing just smells so bad, you know what I'm saying? In that sense. Like it's just like just one terrible decision after another. And then the fact that he's like constantly negotiating with these people, like they're telling him, get out of here to save yourself and save your family. And then, they tell him to go to the hill country, which he ends up going to the hill country. But he's like, no, let me go to this little town here. And then when the whole plane gets destroyed, I mean, they say, and then they were afraid, so they went to the hill country. So it's just like, just not listening. I feel like that's what reminds me, all of this reminds me of, or reminds me to do all these two chapters, especially. First of all, we know in the case of the three men that come to see Abraham and Sarah, and how they, Sarah laughs and Abraham, and I mean, I guess in this case, it's singled out just Sarah laughing at this whole thing and not believing it, and the Lord just being like, look, what is it that he says that I think is pretty cool. He says like, will I really bear a child? Is anything too marvelous for the Lord to do? Is there anything too marvelous? And it's like, how? How is it so easy for all of us? I mean, I suppose it's easier to kind of put it on them because it's like, bro, it's the Lord, speaking to them directly. So I don't know if here the assumption would be that they're not really, they're just hearing this from the envoys or something, because it's like, I'm like, how the hell would you continue to doubt him if it's God himself, it's the Lord? So I don't know if it's more of that, of them not perceiving the Lord, and this is just like told um in time, what I'm saying, with the perspective already, like 2020 hindsight, or if it's just the fact that even being the Lord, because I mean, it's also, again, we go back to what we've talked in previous chapters, that we're in a privileged position because we've already experienced the saving power of Christ in history and through, the evolving of civilization, and the salvation of our own lives. So it's, I guess, easier to just assume like God's great power. But I suppose if you are Abraham, I mean, even though you've seen his power, taking place, but maybe you're still so influenced by, a pagan idea of the world that, thinking of gods as just these entities that come and go, and like they haven't even learned as this beginning of humanity, like they haven't really interiorized the idea of one all powerful, almighty God. That even though they've heard that from him and they know from the stories, that I assume they will be telling each other and their children stuff about their ancestors, about Adam and Eve, and about the great deluge and Noah and such, that ends up coming down to Abraham, right? Even with all of that, it's like, I suppose, yes, but I mean, like, because I just find it, I'm like, isn't it so obvious that it's the Lord? Like, why doubt that you have a son so much? Like, why is that so difficult? Why would that, excuse me, why would that be so difficult for the Lord to accomplish? But again, we see that. And then that intercession of Abraham for Sodom is also interesting in a very different way, because it's Abraham showcasing, I guess, his own way of seeing things, and the fact that the Lord listens to him. That's the beautiful part of it too. I mean, that's the main thing, I suppose, is that the Lord asks for our intercession, for our collaboration in His work. He thinks about it. He's like, should I tell Abraham about what I'm about to do? Now that I've chosen him, shall I hide from him what I'm about to do? Now that he is to become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth are to find blessing in him. Indeed, I have singled him out, that he may direct his children and his household in the future to keep the way of the Lord, by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord may put into effect by Abraham the promises he made about him. So he's like saying, I gotta teach him too. I gotta show him the way of God, the way I do things. It's kind of like almost bringing his son to work, and just kind of being like, Abraham's the one that I've chosen to learn from me. So this disciple, this apprentice, to come and see what I'm about to do, just so he understands how these things work. That there's been a great outcry from people just saying, there's a lot of wickedness in these cities, and there's no resolving these issues. Like, they're not coming back, they're not repenting. There's no possibility for them to do that. The same way we saw, for example, well, this is the only other example I suppose so far, but with the flood, it's like the earth had gotten to a point in which God saw that there was no way out of this, but he needed to clean the slate. And the only one that he would save would be Noah and his family, just as the righteous man, as the righteous people that he could find on the earth. But since he's promised, he's not going to do that again. But now he's encountering a similar situation, but just in a localized part in Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain. And so he has to still clean the slate, because there's no way for them to come back. But then Abraham here is the one that intercedes in that sense, and that God puts this situation to presents the situation to him and tells this is how it's going. And then Abraham kind of steps up to this position of responsibility that God grants him by making him participant in the plans, and he intercedes, and he's like, but what about all the righteous people that are here? Should we just are they gonna pay for this as well? And this is an interesting thing too, because he's not bringing out anybody in specific. He's just saying, what if there is, because Sodom and Gomorrah get destroyed anyway. So the Lord said, even if I find 10 people that are righteous, right, I would save it, right? But he couldn't find those 10 people, which shows us again this fact that some people miss, when you don't read the Bible, I suppose, with faith, I suppose. And with faith, I just mean with trust, with trusting God's love, trusting the fact that even though things might seem complicated or contradictory, they are complicated, but they might seem like they're contrary to that love. If you just look deeper into things and you try to find the reason why there's that apparent contradiction, we can find in them the real reason. Now I don't claim to know the real reason for these things or why Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed or not, but just to take God at His word and believe in His loving presence and His care for us. Because again, it goes back to the idea that there's no point for us, there's no point for God to continue this human experiment, I guess, just to be funny and call it that way, if it really is just an experiment. If he would just wanted to try, like if we see how we usually do our own creation, and stuff. It's like if we see that something's just not going right, the majority of the times we just scrap and start again. That's the easier way. So why didn't he scrap and start again with Adam and Eve? Why did he save Noah? You know what I'm saying? Why didn't he just create a new man again? But he continues to try to help us come back to him, to help us find our way back to him. So he guides us, he corrects us, and again, when it gets to a point in which there's no correction possible, and we are already heading down to the pit, in that sense, to just an endless sense of death, an endless series of sins. Then all he sees in that is like, okay, this is just going to create more pain and more difficulty for the people that are righteous. Like if I let Sodom and Gomorrah continue, right, in this case, or in the case of the flood, if I let the earth continue down this path, not only will they, in the case of the flood, not only will they just continue down this path, but they will corrupt Noah and his family. Or if they don't, Noah and his family will die, and then there will be no good left to save. So it's better to, clean the whole slate, purify the earth, so that those that are righteous, Noah and his family, in this case, can flourish, right? And in the same way here, it's like if I don't get rid of Sodom and Gomorrah, or in the same way we saw with the Tower of Babel, if I don't correct these people and I put them down in that sense, I don't allow them to rise the wrong way, then they will create a hell on earth. You know what I'm saying? That's the whole thing we saw again with the Garden of Eden, the first expulsion. So many people see it as some type of again, if you look at God as a human king, or as a human powerful guy that needs to preserve his power, needs to just have control, then all these justifications, like he's punishing, he's making an example of us, but that doesn't make any sense once you look at God as already all powerful, like not needing to assert his power or preserve it, but just as a way for him to just continue to just be, like he doesn't need to do anything about it. So then the only explanation then becomes, the moment you approach that from the perspective of, God loves you and God just doesn't need to assert any type of power. He just is powerful. Therefore, the action of him expelling us from the garden, or the action of him flooding the world, or the action of him destroying Sodom and Gomorrah become similar to how a parent, disciplines their children. It's something that from the outside, if you, out of context in a sense, or without the trust in the love of the parents, it can be seen as cruel, right? Even you say, why did you hate your child? Why did you, tell him those things? Why did you, speak to him in a loud voice? Because in isolation, those are, like, I guess, well, they are violent things in that sense. They are a way of imposing something on somebody, because that's what a correction is. It's like if that person is not out of their own will, and in the case of children and stuff, making the right decisions, you gotta correct them so that they can learn to do those things. Now, how you do that correction obviously has to be commensurate to the reason for the correction, and also it has to have an actual, outcome, an actual searched outcome for the better of the person that needs to be corrected. So in the same way here, the Lord chooses in these times, in these ages that are very early in the sense of our conscience as humans, right, to make these corrections from our privileged perspective after being saved, after having enjoyed the presence of Christ for thousands of years. And it's just easy to judge them and be like, oh, this is too much. But we don't know what is too much. We don't know what would have been of the world if it wasn't for that. Because we also just lack the context as well of what these people do. I mean, we just see snippets here and there with, for example, the men of Sodom now trying to, like, violate these guests that were just in the house of Lot. Hey, how's it going, Ataturk? God bless you as well, my Catholic brother. Yeah, so we just here reading through chapters 18 and 19 and just meditating on, well, a couple of things that we saw here. for example, that Abraham interceded for Sodom, and how it's like even with God accepting this of like, okay, if I find 10 righteous people on Sodom, I will save the city for their sake. He seems to not like, I mean, again, he's not able to find those 10 people. I mean, apart from Lot, we see Lot and his family are like eventually not so righteous anyway, but we all make mistakes that we same way we see with Abraham in other chapters. But I mean, this is pretty messed up what they then do, the daughters of Lot. But again, but God continues to give us as much room as possible, continues to give us chances. He gives us in the family of Lot and stuff. But you know what I'm saying? It's like even taking those out, again, it shows that God is not destroying Sodom and Gomorrah just out of, a caprice or, I don't know what the word is right now, but just wanting to. It's just like he's gotten so bad that he cannot find 10 righteous people in the whole city. So it's just a city that has become hell. So if it lets it remain the same way, if it doesn't take down the Tower of Babel, it's going great as well, brother. It's going great. I mean, it's been a long, not kind of a long day, just a busy day. I was recording at this church for the first promotional video for Rosarium and stuff. So that was a bit of work. It's always harder to film in public and I had to, say the lines and because I didn't want to read them and stuff. So it was a lot of mental work and stuff. That's also why I'm a bit more dressed up. And but yeah, now I'm here just I guess trying to sit here with the Bible and meditate a bit on this and chill with you guys and see what's up. And but yeah, I mean it's just I used to not see it like that because I didn't, as you build trust in the Lord and as you build faith, you start to reinterpret these events and not only just reinterpret them as in you actually find a definitive answer to things, but you start to see them in a different light. In the light of, God doesn't need to show his power. God is loving. So then these events, these corrections, this that from our privileged perspective seems like too much is really not that much if you consider the reason and the consequence of him not doing those corrections for us. So as we see here again, it takes Sodom and Gomorrah, but then, he saves the envoys of the Lord saves Lot and his daughters, and then his wife. But then his wife again, not trusting in the Lord, turns around, kind of in the sense of turning around, right? From what I see here, it sounds to me like just wanting to come back, just the same way that then we see with the Israelites when they're saved from Egypt. Those people that are like, you took us from slavery, sure, you made us free, but I was happier when I was back in Egypt eating dates, even if I was a slave. So it's kind of that attitude from her. It becomes a pile of salt, and it's like she becomes petrified. She cannot advance outside of the sin that they left behind in Sodom. That's kind of what I see with that image. But again, it's like another wife. Yeah, it goes back to that. And then Lot and his daughters alone in a cave, right? Because they first moved to that small town, even though the angels, the envoys of the Lord, told them to go to the hill country. But then eventually they end up moving to the hill country. Oh, brother, I noticed that you called me a Catholic, but I'm actually a Turkish Eastern Orthodox Christian. Oh, my bad, brother. So yeah, my Turkish Eastern Orthodox Christian brother. I just call you my brother. It's all the same. But yeah, it's sorry about that. I didn't know. I was just, since you said Catholic, I assumed it was the same. I didn't remember. But yeah. So we see here then again. And then the interesting thing to this negotiation between Lot and the people that come to the house to try to get to the envoys of the Lord and violate them, and him offering up his daughters. Like, it's like there's so many things wrong with the actions of these people, the actions of Lot, the actions of his daughters. But they all, like, they're very well depicted in the sense that in the same way we saw it with Adam and Eve, and they saw it with Noah's sons, and we saw it with Sarah when she laughs at the idea of her having a daughter. Having a son in her old age, is fear. This is the constant. It's a very mistakes happen. Yeah, no worries. Thank you, brother. It's this fear that we see in people that continues to invade our ability to trust the Lord and to just not sin. Like that sin comes from just mistrust, thinking that the Lord is not gonna take care of us, right? And we see it again with Lot here, having those guests in the house and not trusting the Lord and, offering up his daughters in exchange to save them. And then the envoys themselves are the one that have to pull him back into the house, close the door and expel those evil men and with the light, with this blinding light. So these beautiful images in general, just to remind us that if we just trust the Lord and we just stop trying to do things our way, is how we will avoid sin. Because then again, now as I was saying and continue to repeat, but just with the daughters, right? Is that what we see? Like again, the people of the Lord continue to fail Him in their fear, because the daughters, now that they're in the hill country in the caves with their father, they're like, there's no men around to have children with. Their husbands were left behind in Sodom because they didn't believe Lot and they laughed at him. So now they decide this great terrible plan of laying with their lying with their father to have descendants out of him. And what happens out of that? I'm saying, what's the consequence? That they give birth to Moab and Ammon. And Moab and Ammon son are the from which the Moabites and the Ammonites come, which are these people that then become enemies of Israel. And with that, I don't mean like it's like it goes back to the reason of Sodom and Gomorrah. The reason they're enemies, the reason is because they are evil. They are away from God, compared to the chosen people of Israel, right? So it goes kind of this, like, what comes out of this? What comes out of like these daughters who are worried about not having descendants and their line ending? The consequence is that sure, their line doesn't end, but what they get in return is a terrible line. You know what I'm saying? They get to create two peoples that are not only then destroyed eventually, but also that just create pain and suffering in the world. The same way with Adam and Eve. It's like Adam and Eve are enjoying the great works of God at the creation, and they don't have any issues, no problems. But then the temptation is, what is God hiding from us? What he's trying to keep us away from knowing, from becoming like gods, right? That's what the serpent tells them. And then there's that mistrust that carries them in that case to to take from that tree and be like, no, 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 we gotta do things our way, so that we can preserve ourselves. The same way with the Tower of Babel, we see it's like we gotta build the towers, because if not, we're gonna be forgotten. It's like God is not gonna take care of us, we gotta take care of ourselves. And then if it's not for God's correction, it's like we will continue to go down this path of just doing things our way, and they just turn worse and worse, to the point of Sodom and Gomorrah, to the point of a city where you cannot find 10 righteous people. And it's just that, I mean, this is what I continue to see now as I reread these things that I guess I knew in the surface. The stories a little bit. You hear, like, you remember certain things. Like, I remember, funny enough, the moment of the wife of Lot turning into a pillar of salt. I guess I remember from early years in the catechism, or small images like that. But you don't. Once I stop and I explore this in more detail, which is the beauty of I guess this show, the book, and this weekly thing that I do, more than anything, is just that the ability to sit down at the end of the day, at least once a week, and meditate on the Bible slowly, with no rush, not trying to get through this in a year, or in like 3 years or 5 years, just slowly, 2 chapters at a time, and just thinking, really thinking about, what is it trying to tell us? And again, there's so much I'm missing, so much I'm probably misinterpreting. But in some sense, it goes back to the same thing that we see with Abraham and God. It's like this constant relationship in which God continues to give us, continues to be merciful with us. And we just, little by little, piece by piece, we gather a little bit more, and we gather a little bit more. So there's nothing, the fact that I'm missing some, it's like, I don't know what saint to say. I think maybe Saint Ambrose, the idea of God and the Bible and the Word of God, Christ, and all the graces that He grants us, and the Holy Spirit and such. It's not. It's a fountain. You know what I'm saying? It's a fountain of water. So going to it and drinking from it and being upset that we don't, extinguish the fountain is not the right attitude. You know what I'm saying? The point is not, oh, I wish I could just fully understand what God is telling us in the Bible. No, the point is the same way you go and drink out of a fountain. You're glad that it doesn't dry out when you're done drinking. You're glad that you can continue to come back to it and drink new water, and quench your thirst at different times in your life. And that's what I'm thankful for, that now I can come back and revisit this. And there's so much that I didn't see the first time I read this, or even like the second, I've seen the first time, I guess, through the catechism and all these things. And then the second time, in the sense like I've listened to the audiobook recently, as in the past 2 years, 3 years. And I got through these chapters, but again, it's just things that I missed, things that I don't notice, things that don't mean something to me at the time. So we continue to grow, and we continue to revisit the word, and see these things. So yeah, that's what I find interesting in all of this. I suppose just meditating on these different aspects of all that we see, this evilness that we see in its different facets. The lost evil, in the sense of like the hopeless evil of Sodom and Gomorrah, But then it's the hidden evil, the corrupted goodness of Lot and his daughters who are saved. The very envoys of the Lord don't see through it in that sense. They see the good in Lot and in his daughters because they saved them from Sodom, right? But then look at what it turns into. You know what I'm saying? It's in them, the two daughters lying with their father, and having these children who then become the fathers of terrible nations. Of evil nations. So yeah, it's just yeah interesting. So let's see some of the footnotes that are they're usually pretty enlightening. So let's see, getting back to the beginning here in Genesis 18. Let's see what we got. Abraham's visitors. Chapters 18 and 19 combined form a continuous narrative, concluding the story of Abraham and his nephew Lot, began in chapter 13. The mysterious men visit Abraham in Mamre to promise him and Sarah a child the following year, and then visit Lot in Sodom to investigate and then to punish the corrupt city. Between the two visits, Abraham questions God about the justice of punishing Sodom. At the end of the destruction of Sodom, there's a short narrative about Lot and the ancestor of Moab and the Ammonites. And then here in 3, he said, Sir, if it please you, do not go on past your servant. Abraham addresses the leader of the group, whom he does not yet recognize as the Lord. So yeah, these 3 men, right? One being the Lord, and then his men, his envoys. In the next 2 verses, he speaks all 3 men. The other 2 are later identified as angels. The shift in numbers and identification of the visitors are a narrative way of explaining the mysterious presence of God. 3 measures. Oh yeah, this is when he asked Sarah to go into the house, right? Where is it? Yeah, quick 3 measures of bran flour kneaded and make bread. 3 measures Hebrew seah. 3 seahs equal 1 ephah, about half a bushel. Okay, just technical stuff. Curds, right? He has he prepares curds of cheese, a type of soft cheese or yogurt, yes. And then one of them, the Lord, when he's talking to them, one of them said, I will return to you about this time next year and Sarah will have a son. Then Sarah laughed. I play on the verb laugh, which prefigures the name of Isaac. See note. Oh yeah, we saw a bit of that. 17:7, or is it that the fact that the name of Abraham is 17:17? Laughed, Yishak, which means laughed. Oh, it's also the Hebrew form of the name Isaac. Similar explanation of the name are given in Genesis 18:12. Right, the idea that is kind of, and it is a fun kind of turn of things, like because we see Sarah laugh at this before, and we've also seen Abraham laugh at the idea. So I think it's kind of beautifully ironic how they end up naming the son Isaac by the command of God, kind of seeing, like, as a reminder that you laughed at the idea that you would have this son, and now look at him, so you remember that you laughed at the promises of the Lord, and I think in a playful way, saying not as in like, it just seemed more like, and it must be a powerful feeling too, because then when the Lord asks Abraham to offer up Isaac, and to trust him, they've gone through all of this. Abraham and Sarah have gone through all of this. They really laughed at the idea that they would have a son, and then they had him, Isaac. So now when the Lord asks him to give him up, when the Lord also continues to promise that a great nation will be born out of him, he's like, if we're going to kill Isaac, how are we going to have this great nation? So I think that these are all shaping moments, like they are in our lives, to get to that point of real trust, to the point to be ready to give up our sons, saying, to give up the very most precious thing in our life to the Lord and trust that He will take care of things. And yeah, that's what we'll see later. But yeah, again, the name of Isaac coming from laughing. 18:20, the immortality of the cities were already hinted. Okay, where is this? The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sins so grave that I must go down to see whether or not their actions are as bad as the cry against them that comes to me. The immorality. Oh, okay. The immorality of the cities was already hinted at in previous chapters we saw, when Lot made his choice to live there. The outcry comes from the victims of the injustice and violence rampant in the city, which will shortly be illustrating the treatment of the visitors. The outcry of the Hebrews under the harsh treatment of Pharaoh came up to God, who reacts in anger of mistreatment of the poor. Sodom and Gomorrah became types of sinful cities in biblical literature. Isaiah sees their sin as a lack of social justice, Ezekiel as disregard for the poor, and Jeremiah as general immorality, right? They just personify in the Bible the sin, the social sin, a collective sin. In the Genesis story, the sin is violation of the sacred duty of hospitality by the threatened rape of Lot's guests. Yeah, I mean, Pretty wild stuff. I remember that part when they just this people from the city just go directly. But again, it's which see this idea of the cities personifying the worst of evils, the worst of social evils. You know what I'm saying? Back to 19. Okay. Oh yeah, destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. The story takes place in one day, continuing a day from the previous evening, evening, dawn, and sunrise. The passage resembles Judges 19, which suggests dependence of one story on the other. Okay, I guess we'll see that when we get there, if we remember. Um, my lords, Lot does not yet know that these men are God's messengers. Okay, because these men that God sent, these two angels that go down to Sodom, to check out, because they were gonna sleep in the square and stuff, and then Lot is asking them to stay the night. Let me bring them out to you. The authority. Oh, this is where is this? I have to. Oh yeah, this is the moment in which Lot gives up his daughters, or tries to give up his daughters to save them, and so I've never had sex with them, and let me bring them out to you. Let me bring them out to you. The authority of a patriarch within his house was virtually absolute. Lot's extreme response of offering his daughters to a violent mob seems to be motivated by the obligation of hospitality. Yeah, but a terrible response to that obligation. And then we see again, we see those men pulling Lot inside of the house again and taking care of matters themselves to this blinding light. An extraordinary flash that temporarily dazed the wicked men and revealed to Lot the true nature of his guests. That moment is when he finds out, these are envoys of the Lord. It is uncertain whether Lot's, what is this? When they laugh, right? So Lot went down and spoke to his sons-in-law who had contracted marriage with his daughters. Come on, leave this place, he told them. The Lord is about to destroy the city, but his sons-in-law thought he was joking. It is uncertain whether Lot's sons-in-law were fully married to his daughters or only engaged to them. Israelite engagement was the first part of the marriage ceremony. God. Even whether the daughters involved were the same as or different from the daughters who were still in their father's house. Oh, I see. Oh, I didn't think of that because when they laugh, right? I was kind of like wondering how that went down in the sense, like, if the sons-in-law laughed, it's like, how is it that he's able to leave with the daughters? Like, I would think that they would stay with their husbands. But again, yeah, it's either they weren't really married and that's why they were still with her father and they were still engaged, or they were different daughters, the two that leave with him. Interesting. I didn't think of that. Christ, the moment they're married, right? They would just be living with their husbands. Anyway, a small place, the Hebrew word misar, a little thing, has the same root consonants as the name of the town Zoar. Oh, it's like that town in which to which Lot moves with his daughters because they refuse to go to the hills against the advice of the angels once again. Yeah, and again, why the place is named Zoar is because it means a small place, the small place to which Lot moved. And overthrew the stem lit turned upside down is used consistently to describe the destruction of the cities of the plain. The imagery of an earthquake and subsequent fire fits the geology of this region. Oh, interesting. Just overthrew, turned upside down. Wow. So yeah, that seems pretty terrible, An earthquake and subsequent fire. Back to 19. Okay, in a depth narrative detail, Abraham looks down from the height east of Hebron, from which he could easily see the region at the southern end of the Dead Sea, which is the plain were probably located. Yeah, I don't quite understand what the point of the note is. As he looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and the whole region of the plain, he saw smoke over the land rising like the smoke from a kiln. In a deft narrative detail, Abraham looks down from the height east, like the fact that they were conscious of the place he was looking down from. Okay. This Israelite tale about the origin of Israel's neighbors east of the Jordan and the Dead Sea. Right, the idea of the Moabites and the Ammonites coming from this line of Lot's daughters with their own father. This Israelite tale about the origin of Israel's neighbors east of the Jordan and the Dead Sea was told partly to ridicule these ethnically related but rival nations and partly to give popular etymologies for their names. The stylized nature of the story is seen in the names of the daughters, the firstborn and the younger, the ease with which they fool their father, and the identical descriptions of the encounters. Yeah, I see that. It does sound kind of one of those German tales, it sounds like a tale, the younger, the older, and they don't have a name in themselves, and it's just to show that out of this terrible thing of lying with their father is, and with Lot, precisely the one that was living in Sodom, that the Moabites and the Ammonites come, you know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, we must not forget that about Genesis, that even though there's divine truth in it, it's a religious poetic type of truth, in the sense like it's like the legends of all the tales. It's a lot of oral, um a lot of yeah, of just transmitting these words, these stories from son to from father to son and through generations. So it's like a lot of it just permeated by the culture, by the perceptions of the context in which these stories are passing down. And yeah, so the idea of that, it's like you got to make sense of the people's, because we see it even at the beginning of Genesis, right, when the world is being created, and the earth is divided into four parts, but the four parts are really just the divisions caused by the rivers around the land where the Israelites are, and how it divides into these different peoples. The people will be North Africa and stuff. So it doesn't address, for example, in America, because it's just the people that are writing it don't even know about these things, and the world for them is that. But again, it expresses the creation of the world through the lens of those people that were writing about it. In the same way here, it expresses the evilness and the creation of nations that follow that are away from God, and such stunning purpose. Look at this bot. Let's get him out of here. Stunning purpose. Not a bad name. Not a bad name. Okay, from my father in Hebrew, Meabi. Similar sound the name Moab. Okay, the name Moab coming from my father, son of my kin. In Hebrew, Benami. Similar in sound the name Ammonites. Right. Interesting. Like the idea of, right. So yeah, kind of I think the editor, whatever the translator of this is pointing out to, it's like it's not necessary that they come from those names, but they associate the sound of from my father, saying the Moabites being out of daughters that lay with their fathers, and I'm sorry, Ammonites being from Benami, the son of my kin. Okay, and then that's it, right, for the notes for this, because then is Abraham at Gerar, which we will see next week. But yeah, I mean, we're getting towards the end of the hour here. We're having a quieter night anyway. But whatever the case, I mean, I think this was interesting. It was a good meditation on the sin that continues to seep in, and the mistrust that continues to lead us away from God, and the many ways in which God continues to try and continues to try to find a way towards us and to correct us and to bring us closer to Him. So yeah, very interesting text, very interesting expression of God's love and God's intercession in the context of it all, because that's the difficulty, I guess, and the beauty of Genesis is just seeing things within the context of a very, very old nation, say the nation of God, the nation that starts with Abraham, and like even before that, the human race that starts with Adam and Eve. And again, from the perspective of it all, as we've discussed in the chapters, of not it being a literal explanation, but nonetheless a rich explanation of where we come from, because it really gives us the essence of things. The essence of that explains so much more than understanding whether we come. So you can hear one of these videos, this whatever explanations like, oh, we come from the galaxy, and the galaxy and is dust, and from the dust we become molecules, and from the molecules we become cells, and blah blah blah. I'm not saying it's inaccurate. I actually think it's mostly pretty accurate, even though they're theories. I mean, they make sense to me, and I don't see any reason not to believe them to the extent. But the reason why I also don't see any problem with believing those theories is that they're inconsequential. Like, what does it matter if we come from a cell or not? Like, the important thing is, why do we come to be? Why are we like this? Why do we feel away from some type of divine nature? That, like, even the people that don't believe, they have that sense of purpose, a sense of wanting to get out of something out of their life, sense of legacy, sense of greatness, sense of like just being something more than this dust and this earthly world. And that's what Genesis gives us, and the Bible in general. It's not necessarily an explanation of everything. Well, it's definitely not an explanation of everything. It's simply an explanation of the important parts. This is the essence that it's passed down, because it's the important essence. It's what gives us an identity and helps us make sense of who we are. It helps us make sense of why we are in the situation that we are. Why do we continue to strive towards God, but we continue to fail? And we continue to see that in these beautiful books, which is the interesting part too of the Bible, and why it's so beautifully, and you can see that it's divinely inspired, because it's not a pretty story in that sense, and it's not ugly in a cinematic way. You know what I'm saying? It's not like seeing the Iliad, or or some other mythological story or the others or anything. It's not a heroic thing in which there are failures and such and so, but at the end of the day, it's all with the purpose of shaping a hero. It's many times just the idea of a people that fails over and over. Like, it's pathetic, in some sense, to see Abraham fail so constantly, and then God asking of him a son. It's like none of these things kind of add up into a fictional thing in that sense. Not that again, not that it's accurate in every respect. Like, it's a scientific text, isn't it? That's what I mean. It's accurate in the sense of how it's expressed within the context of the type of literary work that it is. But it's just the idea of examining it and seeing that it tells a lot about us. It tells the ugly and it tells the pretty. It tells the mistakes and it tells the corrections and it tells, the trust that we have and the very great things that we do as humans and we can do as humans. And then many great things that we can do as well as humans, but moving away from God, moving towards, moving away from God. We see the faith of Abraham and what it ends up becoming, like this great nation. Even just before Isaac and everything, like all the wealth that he's able to accumulate and the great deeds that he's able to do, defeating the enemies of Sodom and Gomorrah against all odds for the sake of his nephew Lot, and then the chapters that they're in Egypt, how they survived that, and the Pharaoh has to let them go and things like that. But then it shows, that in the face of just after all of that, they continue to doubt that God would give them a son. And then with this thing with Lot and his daughters and stuff, it's like, again, we continue to see these two sides of the human existence that can do great, beautiful things when we trust the Lord and we rely on His force, and we don't, yeah, and we don't fall to sin, which is again just kind of has an origin in fear, an origin in mistrust, an origin in the idea that we must do things our own way, that we must pursue our own understanding of the world and move away from God, and then that continues to take us down the wrong path. But yeah, what was one thing that I've been learning, I continue to hone into it because this is the thing that I find most fascinating, which I think it comes with the maturity of just seeing how the world can really turn very ugly. And again, but even in our context, it never is that bad, but in the sense of we've been saved as the world. So it's like there's always that like at this point we're already striving towards the kingdom of God. We're striving towards heaven. So it's almost like always improving, even with the ups and lows, the ebbs and flows, and the ups and downs. But in this point in history, it's almost like it makes much more sense to me now, the idea of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the destruction of the world in a sense through the flood. Like when you think of something that has no way back, what I'm saying, that's harder to imagine for us again because we are being saved. And so we're already moving forward all the time. We're always moving upward all the time as a nation, as a people, as a race, as the chosen sons of God, adopted sons of God. And anybody's invited to it, what I'm saying? Like anybody is invited to convert and to baptism and to find their way back into the promised land. But at this time, before all of that in our history, what I'm saying? Before the Son of God, the Word of God becomes flesh. And at the very beginning, in that sense, relatively is far away from Adam and Eve, but I mean, relatively as well, relative to our standpoint, is very close to that point. So there's so much that we need to learn as a nation, as a people, as a race. So that it makes sense that a city completely being emptied out of good, like not 10 people left that are righteous, and the requirement for that to be cleaned out in the sense, because it's also pointless. It's like kind of saying the idea that it's cruel to end a city like that, but it's like, what is the point of a city like that if it's suffering? It's like the same idea of putting down an animal that is suffering. It's just if it's full of rot and evil and there's no good, which means there's no happiness that is going to come out of it, and it's just going to be this continuous and never spinning like spiral that goes down deeper and deeper into hell. And not only that, that permeates to the rest of the cities and the rest of the world. It just needs to be resolved in that sense, needs to come to an end, to the natural end that is going to come to eventually. It's just the times are of God's, what I'm saying? It's like the moment you're in control of everything, you're God, right? It doesn't, there's no, it all is in His control. So it doesn't matter at what point Sodom ends, what I'm saying? It doesn't matter if it's this great cataclysm that He brings down, or I mean, or any other. I mean, it's always going to be a great cataclysm. Like that's the thing. It's like it all is connected with the will of God, because He wills everything to exist and He wills things to play out as they may. You know what I'm saying? And in the freedom of people, He's just conscious on when that freedom has reached a point of conclusion, and there's no other choice but to continue to go down there, which is no choice at all at that point. Therefore, it's time to end it. There's no point in continuing this story, which is the reason why there's so much mercy in the fact that we continue to exist. There's so much mercy that after the fall of Adam and Eve, like God continues to believe in us, like He sees in us that still we hold in us the possibility, the choice to come back to Him. And I mean, He definitely is right, because we see as the saints, you know, that the personified Christ in the world, and Christ Himself making that choice. Christ is the first to make that choice fully present. But that choice comes from those choices that little by little we started to follow God in our history, you know, through Abraham, through Noah, through Moses, later on through David. We just little by little we get closer and closer, and that reaches its climax in Christ, who chooses fully to give Himself fully for God, and becomes God. No, is God. You know what I'm saying? That is the kind of paradox of it all. It's like it just reaches this climax in which is a union that from the very instance of conception of Jesus, of Christ, is God already. But to get to that point, it has to go through this line. So that's why it's like it's a joint effort between humans and God through the grace of God, because again, we wouldn't be anything without God. So at the end of the day, it is all God, because the God is everything. You know what I'm saying? In that sense, He created everything, so everything comes out of His will. He's the immovable motor of everything. But at the end of the day, in our freedom, we find the consolation, I guess, or even the the comfort, or the, you know, the reward of knowing that we are, and we were, and we continue to be, and we will be part of God's story as we make our choices. And that's the beauty of Christ too, that He is part of us. You know, as much He's as much human as He is God, because He's the result of those choices, of these moments of trust from Abraham, from Isaac, from Joseph, from David, from Solomon, from countless, countless, maybe not so countless people throughout our history, that although and against all these other people that turn away from God, they do in their own full of failure ways, they turn back to God and they decide to trust Him. And now again, we're in a very privileged position, because we already reached past that point of climax, so we can just put our whole being in Christ. Christ can live through us. We don't even have to be making these difficult choices. I mean, the difficult choice in this case is now letting Christ live in us. But it's, I see it, at least maybe I'm wrong in this, or it's theologically not sound, but I find it much easier than the type of trust that Abraham had to do in a completely pagan world, in a completely um, in a world completely away from God. That's why God is much more active in the stories. God is much more present in that sense, because we need much more help. That's why it's also much more direct, much more, I guess you consider, violent. He needs to really correct things so that we are able to make that choice freely. You know, say, to get us that freedom in this case requires much more intervention. In our case, it requires almost no intervention, because He's already intervened so much that it's actually the opposite. Like, it's like if He made it more clear, He would be taking freedom away from us, from the choice of following Him. So it's always that, it's preserving our freedom, preserving our ability to make our own choices, that it's beautiful in God's work, but never letting us down, never giving up on us. So yeah, let's continue to do that, guys. And I guess this is the point where I think we could close the chapter or the episode on, is that it's like, let's do that, let's appreciate God's continual work on us, and His mercy in His corrections, in His consistency, in His continually trying to bring us back to Him. So, and let's respond to that in kind, say, let us be appreciative of that and try to change our lives and try to make room for God and make room for Christ, so that He can changes. Because I often forget. I mean, this all I say these things because it's things that I'm meditating myself. Some people have asked me here on the stream if I'm a preacher and such, and it's like, no, I'm not. I mean, the point of it all is that I'm not. And I don't say these things to you guys. I say these things to myself. I say these things because I need to hear them myself. I read the Bible, not really to you guys. I read the Bible so I remember myself, so that I explore it myself. And I mean, and I enjoy doing that in community. That's why I do it live. I could do this in private, I suppose, and that would be the counter argument to this. But the idea is, or the reason why I do this in public is because it helps me. It helps me be consistent, and it helps me pay attention to these things. And because otherwise, I would find it much harder to do these things. So it's you guys who are helping me. It's you guys who are guiding me in that sense, and God in all of this. So I just hope I'm of service to him, service to you guys, and that and more than anything, the gospel this Sunday was reminding us of that, and reminding me specifically. I mean, it caught my attention in that respect. It's like that I must never, think of this as a way to direct anybody or to guide anybody, because it's I that needs the guidance. It's I that needs the curing and the salvation. And so, yeah, I just gotta be vigilant of that, and to make sure that you all know that, and that I remember that as well. Well, however this turns and whatever this comes to be, this channel and this app and everything, is the idea that none of this is done for. I mean, it's not that it's not done for the people. It is done for the people, but it is my own correction that is the focus, my own salvation, not for the sake of going to heaven or hell, but for the sake of being Christ in the world, of being a good envoy of the Lord, more than anybody else, more than any other care. If I don't take the, I don't know what it's called in English, but the thing in my eye, I will not be able to see the other people. And the priest was expressing in a very beautiful way this Sunday, which is by taking what is wrong in me, like by taking my sin out of my eye. When I see the other one, it's not that now, okay, now I'm ready to correct them. No, it's that the moment I do that, I'll turn so much more like Christ, that I will see other people the same way Christ does, which is in a merciful and loving way. So that it never is a matter of judging. It never is a matter of correcting, because that's not what Christ did when he came, and that's not what he wants us to do, because he wants us to be like him. We must be like our master, perfect like our Father in heaven. And what does our Father do? What does the Son of God does? What does the Holy Spirit do? Continues to forgive, continues to be alongside us, and just supports us as we continue to strive towards God. Trust, you know what I'm saying? He gives us trust so that we can trust him back. So let's trust each other and help each other in that way. Not by correcting each other, not by pointing fingers, but simply by just supporting and being there for each other as we accompany each other in our own ways, in our own journeys. And we appreciate the beauty of seeing each other grow in our own journeys. All right, guys. Very nice night, very nice way to start the week. Even though, it was a longer day with the recording of the video and stuff in the church and stuff, and I didn't feel very encouraged to do this, which it often happens, the way of the devil. Just always just finding a little crevice to make you feel like you should just lie down and die. But I'm not going to do that, the Lord is not going to let me, and he's going to continue to guide me out of Sodom. So thank you guys for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, just let us know in the comments what you think. And, what you think of all this, what's your own journey. Just share with us whatever you feel like sharing. Sharing is the point of it all. And yeah, like the video if you like it. If you want to share with other people, go ahead. That would be great. That way other people can also share with us what they think and what they feel. And if you want to see more videos, you can subscribe. If you turn on notifications, you'll be able to know when I upload the next video. And we do this every week on Monday. So if you want to be part of the live show, you can join us on Twitch. We do this at 11 p.m. Spanish time, GMT +1. And yeah, thank you guys, and God bless you.